Hi guys, David O'Sullivan here, and to mark the release of All the Money in the World in UK cinemas, I thought it would be a really great idea to give you my rundown of my top 5 favourite Ridley Scott films. He is one of my favourite directors of all time. If you watch any of my videos regarding Ridley Scott films, you probably know that I am a big fan of Ridley Scott. He's one of my favourite directors working today. He is in my top 5, favourite directors of all time. And so with All the Money in the World finally being released in UK cinemas this past week, I thought it would be a really good opportunity to give you my rundown of the top 5 best Ridley Scott films. Obviously this can be a subjective list, it's kind of personal to me. These are my 5 favourite Ridley Scott films, and also I haven't seen every single film Ridley Scott's done. He's made a lot of films. I've seen a lot of them, I've seen a lot of the bad ones, but I have not seen every film he's done. So if there's some notable omissions on this list, I either haven't seen them or they just didn't make my list because they're not one of my favourites. So with all that out of the way, let's get this started with my top 5 favourite Ridley Scott films. Coming in number 5, I have Thelma and Louise. Now this only came out the early 90s, I think, but it is a classic, really. It is one of the most iconic kind of films of all time. Everyone knows that famous ending. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it already, but it's pretty well known. And I really like this movie. It is kind of just a typical two women on the run, really, but it's so much more than that. It was so groundbreaking, revolutionary for its time. We'd never really seen anything like this before, with two women, just going crazy, going on the run, taking matters into their own hands, not taking shit from anyone. And it was just so much fun, so liberating for anyone to watch this film and just see these two women just not caring about anything anymore and just taking matters into their own hands and just having fun and going crazy and just letting loose. This really cool, fun road trip kind of hit and run type movie, and yeah, it's basically does what it says on the tin. It's not much more than that, but it was a really great movie, and Susan Sarandon, and I'm forgetting the name of the other actress, they were both great in the movie. It also stars Brad Pitt in one of his earliest roles, a very young looking Brad Pitt in a very kind of small little cameo type role there. For a long time I don't think I even knew it was a Ridley Scott film. It's the one that I always forget. It's actually, it's actually a Ridley Scott film, because I don't think he actually planned on directing this, as far as I'm aware. He was trying to find someone else to direct it. I think he was actually trying to find a female director to do this movie, but then he eventually just got told by actresses he was looking at for the role that, why didn't you just do it? Why didn't you just direct it? And he was like, I will. I'm going to do this movie. And so another reason why I love Ridley Scott, what he did with this film, a really big, powerful statement and a really great, just fun movie that's just a really good time to watch. So there we go, Thelma and Louise at number 5. Coming in number 4, I've got one of Ridley Scott's more recent films, a lot more modern of a film this, and it is The Martian. The Martian really surprised me. I didn't think it was going to be bad. I think a lot of people went in not expecting much because they weren't really blown away by the trailers. I like the trailers. I don't think the trailers actually gave away a lot of the film. At the time a lot of people were saying, the trailers give a lot away. They don't really. There's a lot that trailers don't touch on. And this movie I really, really enjoyed. I didn't know anything about it because I hadn't read the book, the source material it was based on. But as far as I'm aware, it was really faithful to the book in that it's about this guy, Mark Watney, who gets stranded on Mars when his crew think he's dead and just leave him for dead. And then they realise he isn't actually dead and they go back to save him. And it's a really great film, this, because it's technically sci-fi, but there's not really any kind of outlandish, kind of over-the-top, kind of far-fetched concepts, really. I mean, this is something that could theoretically happen in 10, 20 years' time or something. So it's not really that far-fetched. I like to call it more of a kind of space drama, really, because it's not dealing with aliens or robots or time travel or anything like that. It's very much more of a grounded real-world film. This is more of a drama, but it's not as serious and intense as, say, like a Gravity is, or other kind of survival film of that ilk. It is a lot more funny, because it's dealing with this character of Mark Watney, played by Matt Damon, who's a kind of very funny, likeable, charming, charismatic guy. So even when he's in this horrific situation of being stranded and left for dead on Mars, and he doesn't know what he's going to do, how he's going to survive, he's still having fun and cracking jokes, and making these vlogs, and talking to the audience, so to speak, at the camera, and having a little bit of fun and making some jokes there. So it's a lot more fun of a movie to watch, but it also has some dark kind of dramatic moments as well. You know, he's not just happy and jokey the whole time, so it does feel a lot more realistic because we get the humour there because of the nature of who this guy is. But there's also times where he does really struggle and he does feel like, you know, what am I going to do here? How am I going to survive? Should I just give up? What's going to happen? And so you can really root for this guy. You're really with him 100% of the way. But you're also with the guys on Earth. You know, it's not just a castaway thing. You're not with Matt Damon the whole time. It often cuts back to the guys on Earth trying to save him. And it's actually a very uplifting and inspirational film as it comes to an end about all these people across the world coming together to help this one guy in need. It is quite an emotional, kind of uplifting and inspirational, you know, note that it ends on that really kind of hits you about all these people putting their differences aside to come together, to work together, to save this one guy. And it, you know, it really works. It's a really great movie, and I think one of Ridley Scott's best films, definitely one of his best films he's done in years. I really enjoyed The Martian. I thought it was a really great film, so The Martian makes my list at number 4. Getting into the top 3 now, and this is where we get into, like, you know, the real great films. And I've got Alien. Maybe you'll be surprised this isn't higher up on the list, but I'm not as big a fan of Alien as like a lot of people are, but it is an amazing film. It might even be my favourite of the franchise. I mean, Aliens is great. Aliens is definitely the better action movie. It's the more fun, entertaining, kind of more mainstream blockbuster film, kind of. But I really like the original for what Ridley Scott did with the franchise in terms of how he started this franchise, really. I mean, it doesn't really start off like a franchise. It starts off with this great original standalone film in Alien. It is more of a lot of people say it's a horror film, and there's kind of horror elements in there, but actually it's more of a suspense thriller. It's kind of a really great kind of slow burning kind of suspense thriller, I feel like. That was what was so great about this film, because it is this really suspenseful horror thriller, but in space, with an alien on a spaceship, and that had never been done before, I don't think. Because I remember at the time, Ridley Scott was like really worried because Star Wars had not long come out, and he's like, oh my god, I need to make my version of Star Wars. So he decided to do something like Star Wars that was completely different. You know, so instead of this fun, fantastical space fantasy adventure film, he decides to make this really dark, grimy, just, you know, boots on the ground, real world kind of thriller that's about this kind of alien let loose on this ship in space. So I think it was even described at the time as like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space or something along those lines. And yeah, I think Alien is really great. It may even be my favourite of the franchise. I love what Ridley Scott did with the film. A very kind of slow burn suspense thriller that really works. It is slow moving, but there's not any times in the movie where you're bored. You're just constantly in it, and you're constantly intrigued and invested, and you never for 1 second pulled out of the movie. The xenomorph, absolutely incredible design there from Giger. And yeah, everything about this film shouldn't have worked. You know, it's a kind of low budget indie suspense horror thriller about an alien killing people on a ship in space. It's like, how's that going to work? But Ridley Scott pulled it off. He made an amazing film. It's regarded as one of the best of all time, really. And yeah, I absolutely loved Alien. Coming in at number 2 here, I probably love this film more than most, but it is Gladiator. A lot of people maybe put Alien above Gladiator, but I prefer Gladiator. It's such a great movie. Russell Crowe, I think he even won the Oscar for his performance here. And it is really great. Now, it's not entirely historically accurate or anything. You know, it is based on real people and real times, but it's, you know, it is a fictional film. But I just love what Ridley Scott did with this movie. It is probably the last great kind of epic kind of historical drama we've ever got. Historical epics aren't one of my favourite genres, but I do really like them. I am really fond of them time to time, and this is probably one of my favourite historical epics we've ever gotten. I think Ridley Scott did an amazing job with this movie. He's kind of the best there is at doing these epic, kind of visual, powerful films, and Gladiator really works. We're following this character of Maximus Decimus Meridius, played by Russell Crowe. Powerhouse performance from him, got him the Oscar, and yeah, it's really great because it is this epic historical drama, but it's also a really great character study. We're following Maximus on this kind of journey of revenge that he's on, really. You know, he wants to exact his revenge on the Emperor, played amazingly by Joaquin Phoenix there in the role of Commodus. This probably is one of the best villains we've ever had in a movie, at least in modern times anyway. Joaquin Phoenix is an incredible actor, and he was just so kind of just slimy and just evil in this role of Commodus, but at the same time, as disgusting and vile and horrible as he was, you could understand where he was coming from and why he was doing what he was doing, because of how he was treated by his father. He was neglected by his father. He felt like, he didn't even like him as a son, so you could understand what drove him to do what he did. And the back and forth between Maximus and Commodus is really great, and how Maximus is just determined to get to him and take him out. And at least in one of the best finales, when Maximus finally confronts Commodus, and we have that real great intense battle between them at the end. And it has, I don't want to spoil it in case you haven't seen it, you probably have, but it has one of the best endings, and a real quite different ending to what you're expecting, especially if you haven't seen the movie, because a lot of the times films like this would end in the traditional hero way, but this ends very differently. But it just works. It's not different just for the sake of being different. It ends in a way that's just really powerful, and it's really kind of fulfilling, really emotionally satisfying. The music there as well by Hans Zimmer is incredible. Really great Hans Zimmer score. And so yeah, I absolutely love Gladiator. Comes in on my number 2 spot. And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot on my list, this probably isn't a surprise if you've seen any of my other videos on this film, but it is, of course, Blade Runner. I think Blade Runner is by far Ridley Scott's best film. Not everyone would agree with that. Some people love Gladiator more, some people think Alien's his best film, but for me, Blade Runner is by far his best film, and specifically Blade Runner the Final Cut. For me, the Final Cut is a definitive version. It's Ridley Scott's complete vision there, because a lot of things were screwed over in the theatrical release with the voiceover by Harrison Ford and the tacked on happy ending and all that. But by the time we got to the Final Cut, Ridley Scott was able to have control and do what he wanted to do originally, but wasn't able to do, and so he ended the right way. It doesn't have any kind of narration by Harrison Ford. If you've seen any of my other videos on Blade Runner, I've done a kind of my favourite films video on it, but you know how I feel. I think it's just one of the best films of all time, in my opinion. It's a really incredible, revolutionary film. It's this sci-fi neo-noir masterpiece. There really is nothing else like it. Obviously, I'm a massive fan of science fiction, and in my opinion, Ridley Scott is best when he's doing science fiction, and this is like the pinnacle of amazing Ridley Scott science fiction film. What I love about it is that it mixes so many different genres and themes and styles. It's science fiction, but it's also neo-noir. It's kind of a detective, mystery, thriller kind of film, and I love it because of how different it is and how there is nothing else like it, and how there's been lots of things over the years that have tried to be like Blade Runner but have just failed miserably, and it really is one of those films that you wouldn't mistake it for anything else. There really is nothing else like Blade Runner. A visually spectacular film. It came out 35 years ago and it still holds up all these years later. Harrison Ford is really great in the role, and there's just so much I could go into with Blade Runner, but it would end up being a really long video. Maybe I'll do more of an in-depth analysis of the film at some point, but what I love about it, in short, is that it's one of the films that you can just watch over and over again, and you can get new and different things from it each time. And that's one of my favourite things about the films that I love the most, is that they're just so imminently rewatchable. And every time you go back and watch them, you can get new things from them each time. You can see things in different ways than you ever saw them before, and that definitely applies to Blade Runner. There's so many different ways you can read this film and interpret this film. Is Deckard a replicant? Is he not a replicant? But so much more than that. It's about what it means to be human, and the whole final scene with Roy Batty and Deckard is one of the best scenes in cinema history, I think. One of the best closing monologues of any film I've ever seen. The kind of soliloquy given there by Rutger Hauer at the end, all improvised by him actually, and it's just a really great moment. Are we defined by what we are, or are we defined by what we see and what we experience? It's one of the themes that's brought up. What is the difference between us and replicants? What is the difference between them and us as humans? Are we completely different, or are we more similar than we actually realised? And this whole journey that Deckard goes on, where he comes to realise we're not actually so different from them, and maybe he is actually more like them than he realises. Maybe he is a replicant. Maybe the whole kind of horrific irony of the situation is that he's a replicant hunting his own kind and he doesn't know it. That's kind of one way to interpret the film, and yeah, it's an incredible movie. dealing with these big universal themes like what does it mean to be human, and I think it just really works. You know, it's still my favourite even though I love the sequel. I think it's just a spectacular film, one of my personal favourite films of all time, definitely my top 5 favourite films. I could just go on and on about how much I love Blade Runner, but obviously I don't want this video to be 3 hours long, so there we go. Coming in at number 1 spot on my top 5 best Ridley Scott films, it is 1982's Blade Runner. And there we have it, that wraps up my rundown of the top 5 best Ridley Scott films. I think I went on a little bit too much there about Blade Runner, but what is your list? What are your top 5 favourite Ridley Scott films? Is your list similar to mine? Is your list completely different to mine? What do you think about the films on my list? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this and you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to see more. If you missed my last review, be sure to go ahead and click over here to catch up on my last review, or perhaps down here to catch up on one of my recent videos. But with that said, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.